Hey everyone, it's Maddie
and V, and today we're going to be talking about Katy by Jacqueline Wilson.
This is our July pick for our Jacqueline Wilson book club, and it got pushed aside as we were reading books for Yalk, so this is a little bit of an overdue video, but we're super excited to talk about it because it's been a really standout read so far.
Katy was my reintroduction to Jacqueline Wilson when we first decided to start rereading her titles about 3 years ago. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal and one of the best she's ever written.
It's all about a girl, obviously called Katy, who gets into an accident and ends up losing feeling in her legs. She has to adjust to life in a wheelchair, and suddenly everything around her has changed. Her family relationship, her friends, and most importantly, what she can do in the future.
We'll start by talking about our favourite moments.
So my favourite character besides Katy was Helen. She became a mentor of Katy as she's also in a wheelchair, and I think she's meant to be in her mid-20s, so she's already gone through the stages that Katy's about to go through, but she's introduced before Katy's accident, and so you get to see a real parallel of how Katy relates to her both before and after.
It's really interesting for Jackie to have introduced an adult character that isn't related to the main character. This creates a real positive role model for Katy, and their bond is definitely one of hero worship.
Another favourite moment is how the book is framed in 2 school dances, again before and after Katy's fall.
It really serves to show how Katy's life will continue to go on around her, and if she wants to enjoy it and make the most out of it, then that is her decision to do so. She can still have just as much fun after her accident as before.
It's also the first that I can remember where there's quite a serious love interest, as Ryan is her crush, and I absolutely loved how sensitive he was, while also not patronising her in any way. It was just a really sweet part of the book, and I really enjoyed those moments.
Another great part about Katy is how she adjusts to school, specifically with PE, understanding that it's not something she has to give up, because similarly to Ryan, she also has a tomboyish mindset and is very sporty too, which is obviously devastating when she can no longer use her legs and she thinks suddenly all of those options have been closed off to her.
The PE teacher and the headmistress of her secondary school are 2 complete opposites, as her PE teacher is definitely one to encourage her to actually try, whereas the head teacher is constantly thinking of her as an obstacle, and the way Katy thrives is completely dependent on how adults treat her, and so seeing her get to be energetic in class and feel like she's still part of something is really important. We're also going to be talking about the TV adaptation a little bit later, but something that is very different is the school, as in the TV show she goes to a school that has very easy disabled access, but that's something that she has to fight against in the book because they don't even have a lift or any kind of ramps, and I think she can't even go to her science corridor because there's no way for her to fit through the aisles, and so she has to do a lot of her work in the library, and the librarian is another kind of Helen character that really encourages her too.
And our final favourite moments from Katy have to be the hospital scenes.
In the hospital, this is the first time that Katy is facing the difficulty of her disability, and she's not really ready to accept that that's going to be her life. She very much still wants to believe that one day she'll be able to walk again, and that's really difficult as the reader, knowing that that's not the case, but you still want to be swept up in the fantasy of that nothing has to change for her.
The hospital is not a foreign setting for any Jackie books, but often it's a parent or a grandparent that's there, so it's really interesting to see what it's like in hospital life as a patient herself.
The hospital, she meets a whole cast of characters that are just lovely, as well as the other girls on her ward that she kind of bonds with but also has struggles relating to. She's got her nurse, Jasmine, who kind of teaches her what it's going to be like and sympathises with her struggles. And finally there's Dexter, who is a really important character in this book because he, like Helen, has gone through the things that Katy is going through, but he's much closer to her age and is much more willing to talk about the dark side of it and how it can be a struggle, whereas Helen is always trying to put a positive spin on things.
It's nice that Katy gets to indulge both sides of how she might be feeling about her new situation. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the CBBC 3-episode adaptation of Katy.
I know that when we watched it, it was still available on BBC iPlayer, but they've uploaded all of the episodes onto YouTube, so we'll leave a link to the first one because it comes very, very highly recommended from us. We absolutely loved it. And there's only 3 episodes, so it's about an hour and a half, so kind of like watching a feature-length film.
The show does an excellent job of really showing Katy's support group. It doesn't deal too intimately with how Katy feels when she's on her own. She's often always with someone else, and because it's only a mini-series, it does cut out some of the complications, but otherwise it's a really faithful adaptation, and I loved that it decided to focus most strongly on the relationship Katy has with her stepmother, Isabel.
Unlike the book, the TV show takes on a superhero persona for Katy, and that's how she imagines what it would be like to use her legs and still be powerful in that way. But as the episodes go on, it ties into her relationship with Izzy, and it's really special to see how that breaks down and is less relied upon as they become closer and genuinely decide to understand each other.
As a general point, the series is acted so beautifully and the shots are so spectacular as well. It's probably the most cinematic adaptation of any Jacqueline Wilson story, which makes it super compelling, and we had to watch all 3 episodes in one go, and we were sobbing at each and every one of them.
They're really concisely divided into 3, so the first is before Katy's fall, the second is mostly her hospital duration, and then the third is her life when she goes back home.
We absolutely love this series, and we've already watched it multiple times, so as we said, can't recommend it enough, but definitely watch it after you've read the book.
Now onto our discussion questions. So the most obvious one is how we thought the presentation of disability was handled.
As we've mentioned in our favourite moments, we really like the realism and the complexity of Katy's feelings. Whilst of course it has a bit more of an upbeat feeling because it's a children's story, it doesn't shy away from some of the darker moments that really make Katy feel scared about what's to come. We can't talk from experience about the representation, but it seems to give a very good rounded view of what it's like from beginning to adjustment.
I think that this is a book that definitely puts emphasis on empathy towards this character.
But importantly, Katy is never asking you to feel sorry for her. If anything, she's asking for you to be angry that the world is built against disabled people.
Exactly. The other important thing to mention about Katy is that it's an adaptation of a classic, What Katy Did.
In the classic, which I think is actually a series of books, Katy eventually recovers the ability to walk. How is it more important that this more modern story of Katy shows that disability isn't something that can be wished away? Next is, how is Katy similar and different to the other Jackie characters, which is a question we always ask.
Like most big sisters, Katy has a very mothering nature. She's always tasked with looking after the small children and coming up with stories to keep them entertained, although that's never something that she's kind of upset about.
As we've mentioned as well, Katy is loud and she's boisterous, and that's not something that dulls when she ends up in a wheelchair. And I think it's really important to show that after her accident she doesn't become some meek, afraid girl. She's still the same person at heart. Next, what is your reaction to Katy's journey? Also, as we've mentioned, it is trying to be upbeat and give you a healthy mentality about disability, but it doesn't shy away from representing Katy's depression and how she's in mourning of the fact that she can no longer walk. How do you react to Katy as opposed to some of Jackie's other characters?
And finally, if you've read it based on the final chapter, where do you think Katy will be in 5 years' time?
We think she's going to be an activist for disabled rights, but hopefully she'll be training for the Paralympics too.
So if you can't tell already, we absolutely adored Jacqueline Wilson's Katy, and we gave it 5 stars.
Our next book club book is The Bed and Breakfast Star, so get reading for August.
Thank you everyone so much for watching.
We post regularly on social media, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Maddie and B.
And we'll be back with a new video soon, so see you next time.